Hey, aloha everybody. Um, Let me just make sure got everything going here. Share my screen. Okay. Thanks for showing up. Yeah, so my name is Keahi Bustamente. I work for the DLNR under the Hawaiʻi Invertebrate program, where I kind of play two roles, searching for and protecting rare insects and rare land snails. But today I'm mostly going to just focus on the land snails. So here we go. A little bit about myself. This is me and my dad. My family, growing up, everybody was a farmer, or my dad was working on the ranch here in Molokai. Before that, taro farmers in the Hana area. My family still is out there, Ho'opai, Ohana. But I got my start on the island of Molokai, in this region here, in a little old plantation town called Kipu, not far from the North Shore Cliffs, near some of those hills you see in the background. Then around 8, I moved to Maui, when there wasn't any work on the island for my dad. The ranch had closed down, and so he had to go seek work at one of the hotels in Kanapali. But he moved us to Waikapu. So I got my, growing up in this valley, running around, skipping school to go to the valley. Graduated from Baldwin High School. Went off to America for a quick one, joined the Air Force. I got out, came back, and went on a volunteer trip one day to this place called Oahe to do some native forest restoration. And that day flipped my whole life around. And ever since then, about 15 years ago, I've been tied working to this aina, working for the aina, and enjoying every day. So now I am employed by the Hawaiʻi Invertebrate program. Is the website on DLNRHawaii.gov, Ecosystems HIP, and under the Hawaiʻi Invertebrate program is another program called the Snail Extinction Prevention Program. So part of my job, like I did mention, is with insects, but the majority of my work is targeted at preventing extinction of Hawaii's land snails. The lands I currently work on are Molokai, Maui, and Lanai. I want to touch on some of the aspects in Hawaiian culture. Many people have heard stories, I'm sure, of birds in Mo'olelo, or stories, and little probably have ever heard connections to invertebrates. So here are a few examples. Holo holo pinao, pinao being the native name for our damselfly or dragonfly. You can see the planet Mars is named after the damselfly or dragonfly. Another one is Mananalo for the planet Venus. Nalo is the word for fly, or could be bee or wasp. And mana being short for student. So student of the Nalo. Sorry. Some other things are in our stories. A story out of the area of Ka'u on Hawaii Island gives us this Kumuhea. He's the son of one of our main gods, Ku, and he has the ability to change himself into a caterpillar. Laie Lohe Lohe. She's a twin sister of Laie Ikawai in the story, Laie Ikawai. Lohe Lohe, or Laie, is the lao, or la is short for lao of the Ie plant. And Lohe Lohe is the immature stage of the pinao or the dragonfly damselfly. And something interesting is that this story was written in newspapers in the 1800s, and it wasn't until I think the 1960s is when Western science learned that the immature stage, or the lohe lohe, of two certain species actually live in the leaves of the Ie. Ie is like it's a, I think this common name is a screw pine pandanus. And the leaves are clustered at the top and forming like a cup that can hold water, where the immatures of damselflies and dragonflies like to be in water during the immature stage, and it's actually not till they become adults do they crawl out of the water and fly away. And for snails, you can find stories of snails in this story, Lauka Ie, also talking about the importance of connecting Ie to special people in our history. For snails in particular, they were and still are really connected to romance, aloha, and things like that. Ho'ailona, which is omens or signs. And in the story of Laie Ikawai, it is the singing snails that came before the wedding of Laie Ikawai and signified balance and perfect order, and created this pono. Here are a few different names for some of the land snails. Kahuli, Pupu kuahiwi, pupu kanioi, pololei, kaliko, naka, hinihini. And I'll show you in a minute that we have a crazy diversity of snails that we can connect those names to. In the Pacific, though, and Polynesia, you can see that there is a huge amount of land snail diversity, over 6,000 species. So when the first Hawaiians made it here, it wasn't something new to them. Everywhere they had come from or had traveled to had been home to incredible diversities of land snails. Okay, thank you. You can see here in this paper, these guys describe how in prehistory times in Society Islands, Tahiti, and the islands below, the Austral, the Cook Islands, there was a movement of a particular land snail from one archipelago to another by Tahitians, likely because of the importance of their shell in jewelry adornment of themselves. And interestingly, that this actually led to some of the first conservation acts by Polynesian people, unknowingly. When they moved this Parchula snail, two species, they moved to these other archipelagos. They were actually putting it into protection because the two species actually were extirpated from or removed by invasive species on the native island of Tahiti after the introduction of carnivorous land snail Euglandina, which we have here in Hawaii. So, you know, there's a really long history of land snails in Hawaiian culture and Polynesian culture, and Hawaii is home to some of the greatest diversity of land snails on the planet. In 2019, after several years of updating the taxonomy of Hawaiian land snails, the Bishop Museum came out with this 13 families, and these are all the native land snail families in Hawaii today. You can see the number of species here in each of those families, and totaling around 750 species, with 99% of them being only found in Hawaii. Older numbers or counts for species in Hawaii have been as high as 1,500, but Rob Keahi in 1995, another Bishop Museum malacologist, brought that number down to 750 species. But we are already finding out that there are more than 750 species. But this is because of the advancements in genetic analysis since the 90s. So this is the estimates for land snails in 2012. You can see the number in black on each island represents the described amount of species per island. And then the number in red next to that represents what we had remaining in 2012. So it's very alarming that, you know, in 2012 that these numbers were so low. And in 1990, there's a man, Alan Solom, who was a malacologist, also at Bishop Museum. He wrote this paper really asking for the people of Hawaii, scientists, conservationists, to make an effort to find the remaining species that are still alive, extant in Hawaii, and put them into protection. So he says probably 25 to 35% of the 1,461 species of endemic Hawaiian snails have been described are still extant. So that means that about 75% were extinct, he estimated. And unless immediate actions are taken, most will vanish in a few years. So here was his three recommendations. Find out what still exists, identify areas retaining significant diversity, and protect both the species and the habitats. Hawaiian land snails are extremely connected to their habitats, to the plants that are there. Today, it's nearly impossible to find a native snail where there isn't native plants. And actually, most of my work takes me to really, really remote places where habitats are still in good condition in order to find these rare land snails. Here is something from Rob Keahi. I mentioned him before, and you can see he's just trying to get us to remember Solom and what he said in 1990. You know, over a decade ago, we weren't moving quick enough to protect these things. So next part is going to be about threats and you know, try to help you understand what happened. Why are these things so rare now? In this picture, you can see a bunch of different things. Jackson chameleon, we got shells of the Uglandina, the predator snail. Here's some rat mouse fur from another predator. But the biggest thing that happened to these land snails was us. people, um, expansion, Oahu, which this is of, you guys probably know this image of Waikiki and the hills there above, Manoa area, Nuuanu, really well known for their snails, land snails, and like now Tahiti, um, many of those places that had snails are now gone, lost to those threats. One of the main threats is the Euglandina rosea, a carnivorous snail that was brought in to be a biocontrol for the giant African snail. Well, it did a little bit of that. This is 1959, I think. They brought this in. It did some of that. It did control some of that, but it you know, like everything else, it escaped into the mountain and started finding our native snails. And on Oahu, where you know, they don't have to travel very far. People are right up against the mountain and the remaining land snails, and within, you know, just several decades, we've seen massive extinctions because of this, but also the rat, which has been here for a long time, probably slowly working on bringing these things to extinction. But now rats have made it pretty much everywhere on the mountain, and even in the most remote places, you know, offshore islets even. There's very few places that rats haven't been to. Caves, maybe, deep ones. Also is loss of habitat through invasive species, invasive weeds, but now, like the presenters before me mentioned, fungus and things that are killing the host plant of these snails. The ohia tree is one of the most important host plants for the pupukani oi, or the parchelina land snails. And so without those, they will likely disappear in some of these places where it's the only host species. It's not the only host species, but it is one of the main ones. I'm gonna go into some of the survey work now that I've been doing over the last few years, to try and find out where our land snails are still remaining and to bring them into protection. So here's a map of Maui Nui. You can see, this is an old map, but you can see some of the dots representing some of the areas where I've been searching, and they really are some of the most remote places in Hawaii that we need to go to find the last of the snails. So I'm just gonna go through some pictures and share with you some of the diversity that we see here. So this is Nucombia canaliculata, and it is from Molokai. This group, Nucombia, are an endemic genus of snails to Maui Nui, actually particularly Molokai, where we see the rise of Nucombia. They have 6 species, I believe, there, and then they move to Maui, where we have at least 1 species. But this snail is particular to the stems of trees. All the groups kind of have their niche on where they like to be on a host plant or in the forest. Some, like this one, are on stem, prefer to be on stems. Some prefer to be on leaves, some on trunks. A whole group or family, the Amastridae, which is one of the endemic families, really is particular to the ground or near the ground. Some snails like to be in rotting vegetation. But whatever it is very particular to that region of the forest. And they play really important roles there. None of our snails eat green vegetation like some of the other snails from other places do, like weedy snails that you might find in your garden or by your home, that you find in your eating your lettuce or your kale, things like that. Our snails evolve to become cleaners of stems, of leaves. They feed on tiny fungus and algae that we don't really see, and maintain the health of a tree. If for those of you that are in conservation, an important tree for snails, one of the most important, was the olopua tree. Now today, if you're familiar, you see olopua trees. A lot of times they'll be covered in black mold all over the underside of the leaf. And that's mostly due to the fact that there's no snails cleaning them. When you have snails in the area, the amount of fungus on the tree is a lot less. And then for some of the ground ones, worms are not native to Hawaii. So before worms, most of our decomposition was by insects and snails on the ground. Some of these groups of snails, oops, sorry, my light just went out. Sorry, automatic light. Some of these snails are really, really particular to their habitat. So moving on, here's another one in the family Amastridae. This is Lamanella venusta. This is another Molokai species that we rediscovered a few years ago, and it's on a cyanea plant, or haha, a really rare plant. So some of these snails, they're not restricted to rare plants, but they are beneficial to rare plants and keeping them healthy and free of too much fungus. Here is Perchelina virgulata, or one of the Hawaiian words, Hawaiian names is Pupu Kanioi. And you can see they're all congregated on the underside of a palm leaf, the Hawaiian palm lolu. You see the black kind of dots, that's their kukai, their poop. And all of that is just scraped off from the leaf and becomes nutrients for the forest. Here is another Molokai one, Perticella helena. Kind of a smaller snail, about 1 inch. You can see it tucked up in this dry leaf, hidden. During the day, a lot of snails will find shady, moist areas to hide from the sun. You know, their body is mainly made of moisture, and so it's important that they retain that. And on dry days, you really don't see them moving around. Probably because it you know, they just by moving they can lose moisture, and so it's important that they choose the right times to make moves. So usually you see these snails moving around at night, and more so on wet, moist nights. Here's Lamanella aspera. This one is from Maui. A really, really rare group. I just showed you the Lamanella on Molokai. Currently, that's the only species that we know of on Molokai, and this is the only one we know of on Maui. But there were many more that were described on both islands. This group, it basically stays low to the ground too, usually understory kind of species, on the ground even. A kind of a decomposer. This one was living on a fern, this type of a fern. This is a relative of the Lamanella. This is Amastra goniops. This one is pretty much restricted to the ground, and one of those decomposers I mentioned. It really loves rotting vegetation under the EAEA, under tea leaf. You see all its shell, it covers its shell and its poop, and probably a way to camouflage itself. This is one really, really, really hard snail to find. And it is also the only Amastra that we know of on Maui. Another Nucombia. This is one of the Maui ones, Nucombia kimingai, on Olopua. Here's Pupukanioi, Parchelina perdix. This one is from West Maui, and it's on Ohia. Here's another Parchelina, also on Ohia. This is a West Maui species. This one, Parcellina marmorata, this is a cool one because I really thought this was one of those extinct ones that I would never see again. It was known from the leeward slopes of Haleakala. But then one day, I got a text, and one of the forestry crew guys was like, "Oh, what is this?" And turns out in this weedy patch of guava, strawberry guava, that they were gonna open up to cut a LZ for helicopters to land. They found a remaining population of this snail. So this is uh, one of the snails here on one of the strawberry guavas. Here is East Maui species Parcellina porcellana. One of one of the species that is still in pretty good representation across East Maui, better than some of the other species. Still extremely rare though. And when I say rare for some of these things, like this one, Parcellina splendida. Oh, sorry, a little bit wrong spelling up there. It's splendida, but I have ever only seen 4 of these snails. This one, we're talking about there might be maybe 50 to 100 snails at this spot. So we're talking like really, really low numbers. This one on East Maui, there could be 100 something in when we add up the populations. So really, really low numbers. But also keep in mind that, like I said, I need to go to really, really remote, rugged areas to even find them. And Maui is full of that. I haven't even scraped the surface. So there is potential to find a lot more snails out there, but it's really slow work and difficult. And a lot of times you just got to get lucky. Here is Leptacatina vitrina. This is a ground snail and one of those decomposers. This is on West Maui, Oluwalu side. And this one likes to be in a little bit drier forests in the leaf litter, Lama Ohia forests. Here's another ground one, Pleuropoma. This is also on the ground and on leaves. Sometimes it'll go up the trunks of trees a little bit, but mostly down on the ground in leaf litter. And one other leaf litter type, Lyropupa. And this one is an endemic genus to Hawaii, and a live one hadn't been seen for decades. And then I got lucky and I found a spot on West Maui. And so now we are aware of some of those and are taking steps to learn more about its habits and the way it reproduces. And that kind of goes for all the snails. After we find them and document their locations, we need to understand their life history, and in order to to protect them and to help to restore their populations. So this is the newest numbers from Bishop Museum. And so here's that same slide I showed in the beginning. It showed that the number of species described in each family in the white. And then next to that now in red is what we believe to be extinct. Just really, really horrible numbers to look at. The Mastrodae, look, 93% extinct. And I don't, even with further surveys, I really don't think that that number will go down. And that goes for the same for the Acatenellidae, which are the pupu kanihois, those big, beautiful, colorful ones. A lot of those are gone, and it'll be unlikely that we will find some species. But we are making advancements, and we are getting out there. We're getting locations where we're finding these snails. Sometimes we'll bring them in. Many times, actually, we'll bring in a small group of snails like these into a lab situation where we can have them together and help them to it's kind of like a dating service. I think for snails, where we in the wild sometimes they can be separated, but probably seems like miles to them. 10 feet away is another tree that they've never been to, because they're so connected usually to individual trees where they've probably been born and lived into adulthood. So what we aim to do is kind of bring them closer together so that they can mate and reproduce. So this is our lab on Oahu, and all the snails are separated by species in containers. They go into climate controlled chambers that keep the moisture up. You can see that black disc there in the container. That's a fungus that is made in the lab as a supplemental food source. Clippings of ohia and other plants are also brought into the lab and placed inside the containers for them to feed on. And then they're kept in there to reproduce, and then eventually get them back into the wild. Unfortunately, we got to start building these crazy fences to protect them. So this is a crazy fence that keeps out rats and snail, the predatory snail, and it's got electric lines on it. And but on the inside, snails are doing really well. They're linking up, reproducing well, and so's the program. Our program is also doing pretty well and changing numbers, as you can see. So kind of to wrap it up, this is updated. This is from that 2012 slide I showed you. Now you can see the the number in red is the 2012 number, and then now in blue is 2019 numbers. So we're starting to find them, and we're getting back there to close to the original numbers. But still a lot of rare snails, and a lot of them headed towards extinction. Sorry, I think I went a little bit over, but I just want to mention and my thanks to these groups here that really have made conservation of Hawaiian land snails possible. And I'm hoping that one day we're gonna be here wearing lei around us again, and hearing the land snails singing in the forest. Mahalo. So I don't know, do we have time for questions?
Sure, go ahead. I might pop up the ending poll. So
Okay.
if everyone could take that poll and then maybe ask any questions to Keahi while he's on here. Anybody have questions? Is there anything from Facebook?
See, somebody on Facebook said, thank you. Great honor to have you. I'll listen to your work.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay. Appreciate the time for listening.
Yes,
all my friends who showed up.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Keahi, and for sharing all that information. And we shared the snail guide, but I guess there's an updated one. So maybe we'll get our hands on that as well.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well,
okay.
Thanks for coming, and we will see you again soon.
Okay, take care.
All right, everybody, if you can work on filling out that post survey, it has a lot of the same questions that you guys had answered earlier on the pre-survey. So this just helps us see what you guys have learned. Hopefully you've learned something, and we'll be sending out a post kind of training email with lots of information on it, any of the resources that we've shared today. So yeah. We've got about 4 people who have entered in the questions. All right, so we're almost done with the polling. Maybe give it about 10 more seconds. There's actually a third poll. We appreciate everybody's time. Right now up on the screen should be just some ways that you can help us do the work that we do. And I think all of us have kind of mentioned this throughout the training. And we have lots of ideas about this, and hopefully you can put this into practice wherever it is that you guys are working. And we have all of this information on our website. There's mauimauka.org/volunteer, where you can find resources on where to volunteer. And then there's mauimauka.org/resources, where you can find information that I just shared with you, and then also the infographic guides and such that you can use on your tours or wherever you want to use them. And there's definitely other ways to get involved. You know, you guys are all learning, sharing all your knowledge, experiencing these ecosystems and species that we've just talked about today, and continue learning. And also, Allison wanted to remind me that there's another awesome event tomorrow on the East Maui Watershed Facebook. There's going to be a Facebook Live presentation with Dr. Fern Duvall, who is an amazing human being and conservationist, and you'll learn even more tomorrow if you attend that. Thanks for doing the polls, and thanks for the extra time today. And if you missed something, this Facebook Live will be up on our Maui Mauka Facebook for at least the next couple weeks.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So,
I'm sorry.
oh no, we do these usually about 4 times a year. So this is it for this year, but next year we'll do some more. Probably, I think we're talking about February, early March. So if you know any tour guides that are starting up, please tell them about it and get them on board to get some of this great information before they go out and share it with others.
And definitely, if you don't already, follow our Facebook page, because we advertise the trainings through there. And there's also a whole host of great conservation information that, and different information about events that comes up too. So the Maui Mauka Facebook page is great. Good suggestion, thank you.
Yeah, and we're always open to suggestions on this. Usually, of course, we do these in class, which is a lot more fun and interactive than doing them on Zoom. But we make do, as we all are. But any suggestions anybody has, we're always open to that. And guest speakers that people are interested in, too. That's always good. All right. We're done. I think we can close it out.
Yeah, I was just waiting. There's just a couple more people, I think,
We're gonna go.
for the poll, but I think mostly everybody has gone now. So we can stop